Alright everybody, welcome to the West Pacific Typhoon Season Forecast update. This will be a short video, probably 5 minutes, maybe it's slightly longer, but we're going to talk about the forecast update. Of course, if you've already seen this post on X, then this video wouldn't be of much use, but this video is just explaining the presentation that I made on that. And so this will just be really trying to look within the July to August to September range with what the typhoon season is going to be setting up towards. I've already made posts and discussions about this several months before, so this is just a realization that I could make this into a presentation and present it instead. So here we are now discussing it kind of mid-season, so it's going to be more of these few months looking out ahead of time. And if you do want to get into any of these discussions, there is, I'll put in the description and the comment section as well, a Force 13 live tracker. I tend to discuss a lot of the stuff there. I do also discuss on X, so if you have anything you want to discuss or track, join me there and say hi, and I'll be there to talk. So without further ado, let's go. So one of the first observations that I was making was that there are slightly cooler SSTs between. So what we're looking at is the SST temperature anomaly, and this is a fixed base looking at from the current year and how it is in temperatures of the ocean towards the how much of an anomaly they are towards the climatology period, so 1991 to 2020, and the currently obviously is 2025, and this is comparing how this date currently is panning out to be. And so on the observations, we've noticed that the slightly cool STs border between La Nina and it's transitioning towards a cool neutral. So you're looking into this area right here, into the Nino 3.4, just as I said, and obviously the latitudes are mentioned here as well. And then for the West Pacific, increased tropical cyclone genesis west of the 150 degrees and near Micronesia, so we're talking around here, with also favourable northern Philippines. So the Philippines is right here, so the northern Philippines here, and the correlation isn't necessarily a causation to cause above average numbers as the recent years show. So basically, despite there being El Nino or La Nina years, particularly talk about La Nina years here, there's been years like 2022, 2023 and 2021 even, we can probably go back to 2020 as well, a lot of different big impactful seasons, but not necessarily above average. They are an impactful season, but that doesn't mean from the season summary that it was an above average season. Yes, the conditions may have seemed more favourable, but that doesn't mean an absolute correlation that you are going to see an above average season. So again, you might see an impactful season this year, but that won't necessarily mean it could be an above average year. Last year was an average year. It was on the right, exactly around that average mark that's typically expected for a typhoon season. So it's one of the few years in like 5 years that's actually reached the average threshold. The last time a season was above average, I believe, was 2019. So again, the season can still be very impactful, like 2023, which is below average, one of the least active seasons in a very long time, only around 18 tropical cyclones. Yet we had systems like tropical typhoon Doksuri, which is obviously a very impactful storm. So again, that is something to bear in mind. And this is going to be two different diagrams, so I kind of had to compress this together, but you've got the C3S, this is the climate model. This climate model is specialized in these diagram schematics, and this is looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies, so the mid-level, and this is going to show in other words, like the geopotential heights on the top diagram and how they compare to the average. So you've got this sort of anomaly pattern again, and this is the 850 millibar, so the near surface to the low level, and this is the vorticity, so this is going to be showing that chance for spin and the direction of that rotation and so this red is going to be cyclonic, so counterclockwise, and then you've got the blues, which would indicate regions of high pressure, or more so clockwise rotation. And so what we've written here is a prominent feature currently. This is the July illustration. The westward extension of the monsoon trough, so looking down here and up here, both overlap in the same region, is enhancing vorticity and convergence, and that's exactly how Danis formed within, or Baizing as well, if you know, from the Philippines, around this region, and just how Tropical Storm Mun also formed around this area of influence from this monsoonal trough. So this is directly overlaying, and the two tropical cyclones occurred within this region of favorability. And now we've got two other schematics. This one is showing the outgoing long wave radiation. So if you've got a lot of precipitation convection up here, then you're going to have these long wave radiations that are going to be, well, not radiated outward, because if you have a high pressure system, then you have a lot of surface heating and a lot of outgoing long wave radiation, so you would see a positive anomaly. So in this blue, in this case, is a lot of convection, and more so this large scale convection is in part due to the time period that it's demonstrating. This is going to be an MJO orbit. The bottom graphic is just a precipitation anomaly. So with this, the MJO signal in July, phase 7, which is the favourable period in the West Pacific, shown with the graphic, and you got the other graphic. When you put them together, it shows this convective signal that is going to be with behind and to the west in the South China Sea suppression. So you got this sort of yellow shading and this brown shading here, and that's where the suppression is. And then obviously the moisture is where the blue anomaly on both schematics are. This could set for several storms to form. Nari, which is already formed at this point, and the MJO is already coming into influence, but this storm has already formed, and we still have an active invest that has been up to the north as well. And so we've also have more signals of development hinted at, which we'll just cover in a moment, but we do have more hinting of development. So this is a good signal that's representative of several storms to form. Every time these MJO orbits happen, that's like a favourable cluster, a phase in which you see multiple tropical waves that tend to have a higher likelihood of forming into tropical cyclones, and that is quite a usual sort of sign that if there is some more guidance, then that guidance is probably, and if it's overlaid with an MJO orbit, it's likely with an influence. And since that has been occurring for many a times, like last year, it's a pretty good signal to see more development on top of Nari, which is already just formed. The next name will be Wipa, and that would take whatever name the next tropical cyclone will form as. And so we're using another teleconnection. So this is going to be one type of oscillation that will demonstrate influence on the basin's activity. It may not necessarily be a very significant influence, but we're going to discuss it anyways, because it does have a decent influence. There is research papers that have clearly highlighted this. So we're talking about the IOD, so your region of interest. So looking at this graphic again, this is the temperature anomaly that we showed at the beginning. This is with a 15-day change, so this is quite useful as it is not a fixed long period anomaly. This is showing the recent temperature changes that have occurred, and you can see, well, a lot of the reds and oranges are going to be the above average, and the blue is going to be the below average. So the region of interest is going to be down here, and again, if you read along, the mixed IOD signals with fixed climatology, it would tend towards a marginal positive IOD near Sumatra and Australia, and that's the coordinates, which would suggest delayed southwest monsoon response. However, 15-day average shows more negative IOD signal, and these sort of blues that are starting to appear in the same region of interest. And yeah, this is a more close term signal, and thus the monsoon signal has been prevalent in the Philippines. So you've got quite an active monsoon that, if you look at Danas, for example, that storm really did evidence that monsoon quite active. A lot of flooding in the Philippines as well, and that's obviously in part due to the monsoons. So you have this enhanced southwest monsoon that's really been occurring, part with the relation of the negative IOD as the temperature anomalies show within this region. And even if it was a slight positive IOD using the longer range graphic here, it's sort of an average. You've got some above average, but it's more so average. Again, that wouldn't mean too much of an impact on the southwest monsoon, and if it was a positive IOD, that delayed southwest monsoon would be more evident now, but it does tend to show the negatives. And again, talking about the same oscillations of the same teleconnection, this is a graphic of ocean heat content. So this is going to be showing the depth of warm water content below the surface and how deep it extends. So you have an ocean thermocline and how warm that depth of the water will directly correlate with the ocean heat content. So if you have these high reds, you've got a lot of deep water content. The Philippine Sea is a very renowned place globally for extremely high, some of the highest typically of ocean heat content, and any storm that just forms and is mature within this region always has a chance of rapid intensification. That's pretty much a figurative statement, because it's always something that is there to observe, and any storm that has occurred within this favourable zone of interest will develop, and it has developed in any years recently. So again, it's always something to keep your eye on, sort of an eyebrow raise when you see this. And you can see how it's starting to increase to the northerly latitudes as well. You got to see these greens near Japan now as well. Not always you get these greens near Japan. So again, this is demonstrating some more favourability within these higher latitudes for storms that do persist, like Nari right now. And so you've got these higher shadings to northerly latitudes. And so the description is, if the negative IOD signal for July and August, then the tendency is less recurving typhoons due to not as enhanced subtropical ridge, and therefore more under the ridge rapid development over the exact region of interest that we just mentioned. And then there can be some variability, such as the steering flow from ridge breakdown, which can lead to the tropical cyclones recurving. So that's adding more specificity to the description of the signal. But there is this sort of idea that if you have this sort of dominant ridge pattern, then you would see these tropical cyclones move under the ridge into this favourable zone of interest. And currently the storms are recurving northwards and forming at high latitudes. So when the next guidance of the next tropical based invest that will develop, it will be interesting to see how the ridge pattern will demonstrate more so about this IOD signal and the ridge pattern, because the ridge is obviously very important in these typhoon seasons. And so again, if you have this sort of westward extension of this ridge, then you could have a storm right under the ridge. And that's actually quite similar to Beryl if you want to look at it from an Atlantic perspective. You do have Beryl that kind of had that sort of influence as well, a very southerly latitude. And with the OHC, the SSTs being 1.5 to 2 degrees above average, tends to provide warm pools, strong warm gradients east of Luzon, Liap, and it promotes high enthalpy flux. So you've got this later and sensible heat. and then you've got this, which provides a favourable zone of tropical cyclone development. And so when you have this warm gradient, you're going to have these systems that traverse the same region, but when they upwell cooler water, this is going to allow for this latent heat release to constantly be fueled with new thunderstorms from the warm ocean depth, providing a recycle of warm water. And so that warm pool plays an effect as well. These storms always are most favourable within these barotropic environments, but the baroclinic environments can tend to favour less development. So this is kind of tied in all the sort of discussions that we've just been making about this under the ridge pattern or what's going on. Obviously, this is pretty known that these models hint guidance, and that's how you get development, like outlooks like that something may form. So these models are obviously very reliable. Like if you want to understand the tropical cyclone, whether there will be some development in the future or not. Of course, the long range guidance is not necessarily going to be predictive of a true outcome of what actually is going to happen, but it's a good guidance that you should always keep in mind anyways, because without any sort of this model guidance, you're kind of left with an expectation from the environment parameters, but you've got no sort of localized short range guidance that will hint at where a storm will actually form within this favourable environment. And so I normally go around 180 hours out in time, which is the sort of short range to medium range. That's basically an ideal period where the storm developments up to that point they're idealized and they're projected, but they also tend to form within that time period. Anything beyond that is quite blurry. It kind of rapidly drops off the actual likelihood of those storms actually being something that could be developed. So, like for example, a Chantal was within that 180-hour range, hinted, for example, by the ICON model, and that actually occurred. So that would demonstrate that that 180-hour is this sort of favourable sort of range. Whereas when you get these outlandish GFS runs, they typically tend to be 360. So again, with these are the ECNWF, so this is the Euro model and the GFS, the American model, and so you've got these two at the top, they should be the Euro models, and these two at the bottom should be the GFS model runs. And so again, this is just one run, but this is going to show the short to medium range guidance. So we got the GFS and Euro showing this favourable tropical cyclone development in the short range, and you got these two tropical cyclones. One is Nari, so that's already developed. So again, these models did hint at Nari, and it has developed already. So both the models here, and if you look at the pattern is able to maintain longer than that, and wouldn't surprise more pulses or waves become tropical cyclones, and a combination of Philippine Sea storms and recurves around 140 degrees. So the recurves obviously is kind of tying into not just Nari but other storms that will develop within this sort of wave pattern as more systems appear and try to develop and show up on the shorter range guidance. So you have one under the ridge patterns. You've got this ridge that's out here towards the east of Japan, and you got this sort of same location actually with the GFS, and you've got quite a strong westward extension, and you've got this under the ridge pattern. You've got this sort of Philippine past storm, just as the guidance showed, a very favourable period. So any sort of storm that does develop here could rapidly intensify. Obviously, the localized short-term impacts, such as any sort of other thunderstorm complex inducing shear, will be only forecasted and then all nowcasted in a moment as within that short range as the storm's already developed. But otherwise, this is a pretty good signal for development within the reliable period range. So this is within that 180-hour development range. You're seeing two model runs from two different machine learning guidances providing this Philippine power storm here. So it'll be worth watching, and it does have a potential to be named Whipha. And again, with the temperature anomaly map, so again, third time being familiar, So this is just another observation. This is more so about the recurving storms, these storms that develop around the higher latitudes, the subtropics, the extratropics. Extratropics are kind of, well, they're about up here, and the extratropics just below that are the subtropics, and you got this sort of region here. We're talking the recurves around 140 degrees. That's why my pointer is pointing around this direction, because you're talking about around that area, which is where you see these recurves quite frequently. So any storm that does go up north is going to be something that's being benefited in this scenario. So this is what the description says. With the Kuroshio current north of Japan, with very warm ST gradient providing baroclinic enhancement, any recurving tropical cyclones will benefit greatly and maintain longer, potentially for longer and stronger landfalls. If tropical cyclone tracks occur within South Japan or near South Korea, which is favourable in Lanada, so the neutral pattern that we have right now in the Enzo region, usually you have these in this Enzo pattern, you have these recurving storms that do occur. Happen almost all the time anyways, but within the short range guidance, if you do have these recurving storms that do develop just like Nari, but of course any other wave that does develop and moves into these high latitudes will benefit. And now we have several schematics to put together, and this is again kind of similar with the guidance with geopotential heights anomaly at 500 millibars, and you've got actually the longer range, so you've got the August and the September, the other 2 months that have been specifically highlighted as well, and you've got the same sort of schematic here. This is just the cyclonic vorticity at 850 millibars. So this blue region here is your high pressure ridge, and you got it appearing within both the August and the September guidance, as well as it picking up with the 500 millibar pattern geopotential heights as well. And it is initializing pretty well actually. If you think about what the guidance has been showing in July with the ridge pattern, it and the monsoonal troughs, it's directly as is being observed with this. So it's quite effective right now in demonstrating July. So these close ranged sort of outlooks are hinting with this sort of pattern right here, which the schematics show, and there's a good confidence behind this being true to what actually can occur as we approach that time frame. So particularly into August, September, the signal support with the ST maps that the STR, so the subtropical ridge, has a westward extension caused likely due to the NAO teleconnection feedback via the Arctic Asia wave trains, so Rossby planetary waves, and STR configuration expected to build into August with warming STs above average on fixed ST anomaly, and warm anomalies create diabatic heating, lowering pressures, favouring ridging to the west, warmer 32 degrees north, so around the subtropics to extratropics. NPO typically associates Aleutian troughing, but climatology wise it reduces. So you've got this TED connection link that does provide this sort of demonstrating of what the schematics currently show with this right here, this orange shading here with the STR and the blue shading here, and that is a signal with the pattern to support what is being shown. And the same graphic again, this is going to be the analogs, and I think this is going to be the most interesting, the most unique part to obviously all the discussion. And as almost as generalized as it is, it really works quite well actually. Like last year when we were talking about 2024 analogs, you had some other years being mentioned that were quite similar. Like, I mean, I particularly remember it with the Atlantic. So we were talking about with 2024, the 2005 and 2020 season, and 2017 season as well. And really, that was a really good sort of guidance. So yeah, this is going to be sort of for West Pacific as well. This West Pacific guidance is now going to show with the analogs 2011, 1998, or 1988, sorry, 2000 and 1995, and the teleconnection signals within the region of interest that will be influencing this. You've got the negative PDO. I mean, you can agree with or disagree with this, because this is just an observation. So this is what I've got to build with this analog. But you've got the negative PDO, you've got this positive WPO, positive NPO, positive DPO, and neutral to positive IOD, and then you've got this enzo called Lanada. So the Lanada is here, you've got the PDO horseshoe around here, and you've got the West Pacific Oscillation, so the WPO here, with the North Pacific here, the DPO is also within this as well, and then you've got the IOD here, and yeah, so this is a pretty good configuration. So 2011, you saw quite a few storms recurving, and you saw quite a lot of impactful season storms as well. You didn't see that many high typhoon, super typhoon sort of status storms, but you did see a couple. I think there was, I don't actually quite remember the names now, but there is a few super typhoons, but largely I do remember recurving storms and a couple of impactful storms within this region of interest. So that will be interesting to see how that materializes. 1988, again, another season that did produce several impactful storms, but a lot of recurving storms did occur within that year. 2000 is quite similar, actually. Again, 2000 really did emphasize the year of recurving storms, but also a year of several impactful typhoons that kind of did occur within this similar pattern that we're observing right now, actually. And 1995, I think, is like the most iconic year of all of these. This is probably what got everyone's attention. Yeah, it's because I mean, one of the things obviously is that the season produced very significant storms, lots of significant storms, but of course you had storms like Angela, which really, I mean, you can't forecast a storm like that from this sort of pattern, but you can say with this sort of pattern, if 1995 is as good as the analog as it is for this year, then if you do have this sort of configuration with the storms within this sort of well, of course this is the July to September outlook, but if you do have storms within this sort of duration that do highlight that sort of configuration similar to 1995, you could see quite a few impactful storms. And Angela itself I do believe occurred outside of that, but the later sort of period of like October, November, I didn't really put in here. I feel it would be too long, it'd be too sort of long distance. I'd kind of want to approach that time period closer, and I guess it'll be more interesting as well as you get closer to that time period. But 1995 is a season to watch because you've got those recurving storms, but you've got those impactful storms, and with it being a similar configuration to this year, if this year really does materialize as demonstrated with its guidances, then it could be a 1995 season, and I do believe 1995 was an above average season, so that's something to really pay attention to and got to see. I mean, these analogs don't as much as they're interesting, they're also really quite useful sometimes, and more so with these West Pacific sort of seasons. You don't get a lot. You got a lot of variability within this basin. There's a lot of different things impact this basin. So to have such bold analogs and multiple analogs like this, I think is really definitive of what we could start to see with the season, and with storms like Nari already sort of, and with the future guidance already hinting at these sort of storms to happen. You're already sort of seeing that forecast to materialize sort of effect. You've got this sort of guidance that will produce what is currently being observed as well. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.